Hey everybody. So, instead of just I should be I should be editing a video that was supposed to come up like weeks ago, but instead I'm going to just talk about footage of me playing Minecraft because why not? So, you might be wondering what this is, and if you somehow clicked on this without looking at the title, interesting. But I wanted to talk about my way that I have always like rated games and stuff. So, when it comes to like rating games and movies and stuff, I just make a line. And by line, I'm serious when I say like I just like go down the list. So, I have right here a list of games for me to write down when it comes to uh when it comes to games that I played this year. And it's really fascinating because I think the first game specifically I want to talk about is not like which game it is, it's why the game is on the list. And I think it's actually a very important place to start. So, if you don't know, I make an entire line from top to bottom, top being my best thing of the year, bottom being maybe not even the worst thing of the year, it's just the bottom of this list. So just take it with that. So I want to talk about I want to talk about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So I made a video that I never published a while ago about Final Fantasy as a whole when it came to why I like it so much, and I wanted to do content uh surrounding Final Fantasy. And it's not even specifically 7 that this is in relation to. But when it comes to Final Fantasy as a series, I've always really enjoyed the series as a whole. And when I really think about it, I'm usually the type of person to, and you could see this whenever I play uh, other RPGs, especially older RPGs with like grinding, with like very harsh grinding and stuff. Like, I fundamentally love RPGs down to like their very core. So when a game comes out that is ah man, I'm just going in like a weird direction with this. So instead I'm gonna just like talk about a very specific thing with Rebirth that I really enjoyed. And this is going to put everything else that I talk about into perspective when it comes to which games ranked highly on my list. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is a game that's really high on my games of the year list because I put a lot of time and effort into making sure that I got 100% in that game. And I can't say the same about a lot of things in this year. There were a lot of RPGs that came out this year, and I only had so much time. So one of the RPGs that I'm going to talk about, I literally only saw gameplay of like secondhand. But the nature of that game and what it was telling told me that the game is going to be fascinating to look into. It's why I put it pretty far down on my list, but I love the concept so much I had to boost up a little bit. But in Rebirth, there's this vibe to running around this open environment and finding a bunch of cool new stuff in what is seemingly a well-trodden universe. And some people know the universe of Final Fantasy VII like the back of their hand. So when they are told, "Hey, we are putting more time and effort into this in particular," some people are a little bit confused. Like, why are you spending more time with this? And it's more that when when they set out to make Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, they wanted a game that gave you the feeling of playing Final Fantasy VII for the first time again, which is a tall feat. But specifically, they wanted you to feel as clueless to the story, as uh, as overwhelmed with the massive world that the game sits in, and just kind of let the universe absorb the player, so that they get engrossed into it. And I could totally understand that. But not many RPGs this year had me sitting down for 10-hour stints in a chair, uh, because for those of you who don't know, I don't really play too many games uh on my PlayStation. I usually play most of my games on the PC nowadays, and that's more of a comfort thing because uh I do not have my PlayStation in the same room that my computer is in. So devoting time to being on the PlayStation is time away from being on the computer to do other things on the computer. And Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is in fact coming to PC, but I felt the need to play it on PC. Sorry, to play it on the PlayStation, since I had already bought Final Fantasy VII Remake years ago on the PlayStation as well, so that it could recognize that I have a save file from that game to see what they do with it. There isn't too much. There is some cool carryover stuff between the main game, the DLC, and a few other things. But it's mostly just like cosmetic stuff that you could completely miss otherwise. But it is kind of neat, the fact that they at least recognize the fact you have a save file. But this is where I have to say, like, I'm not spoiling anything except for like 3 games because I have to explain like the core conceit of certain games about why I became so attached to them. So, how about this? I am going to start filling in this list. I'm currently looking at a list that I made, and I'm gonna just go down this list in terms of like what I think I should talk about. And I think the very next one that I should talk about, specifically because we're talking about, the remake of of an older game being put into a more modern setting. I love Stalker 2. It is such a fun experience. As someone who was accidentally gifted Stalker Clear Sky as a young kid, and I loved playing that game a lot. I grew to really enjoy Stalker as a setting, and the background of Stalker as a series is just really fun to me. And some people could go like, but it's just post-apocalyptic Russia. Like, what's so interesting about it? And I don't really have a good answer to that, but there is something, like when you play a Fallout game, you sit down, you're in you're in a world that has been destroyed, and it went from a very normal, grounded universe into something that is fantastical. And you could definitely understand from that perspective when a when the game almost comes off as a little bit too realistic with its weirdness, it feels different. Uh, I honestly I think that's the best way to do it. To say that Stalker 2 is basically a Fallout game, as in like Fallout 4. Like it feels like it gives me the same reason of why I enjoy it that I enjoy Fallout 4. And I could totally understand people going, "Yeah, but that's not really that interesting to me." And I could understand that. One of one of the downsides to playing so many games in a year is that sometimes games kind of just blend together. And Stalker 2, a game that I was really looking forward to, did kind of fade into the background, which is a shame because I really enjoyed the amount that I played of the game. But as the list goes on, it's this gap between Rebirth and Stalker 2 is going to be made very apparent. And it really comes down to I put several hundred hours into I put a lot of time into one game and I didn't put a lot of time into the other. And that's where it basically hinges upon is what game what games do I take, like all of my brain power into thinking about. And that might sound like a weird criteria to some people, but in all honesty, when you have a game or a franchise that can monopolize uh, the brain space of someone longer than it took for them to play it, that's usually a mark of a good game. And when I leave a game still thinking about it, like days or weeks after, that's where we start getting into really, really fascinating games, in my book at least. And I know that that's not like everyone's cup of tea. No one wants to like be told that their game of the year wasn't really game of the year because it didn't, like intellectually challenge them enough. It's like I don't want to make it sound like that, but I will say that's the type of experience that I want. I want a game that will stick with me for a while. And when it comes to certain games on this list, I have definitely been thinking about these games for a while. And the reason why Stalker 2 ends up pretty far down on the list is because it's not sharing the same like brain space as a lot of other games. Like let's just take another game from my list and just add it so I can explain this. So between the two, you have Metaphor Refantasio. So I did not get too far into the game for it to just be slammed into my list. And it was mostly because of one very specific aesthetic and story writing choice that really got me fascinated about where the game is going. And this is one of the games I have to kind of spoil the is it really spoiling if it's like within like the first like hour of gameplay? I would say so, considering that I saw like some marketing for it, but I wasn't really paying that much attention. So when it happened, it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. But the game more or less deals with racial hostility between groups of people. And your goal is to basically unite all of these people under one banner. The problem is that you are one of the few non-animalistic races because you're effectively the closest to a human that you have in that world, which is not a good thing considering that humans are the things that you fight, which are these like monstrous beings that are, SMT demons, effectively. And the second that the game explains that to you, you go, oh, where are we going with this? And during the whole thing, there's this storybook about not a perfect city, but one that at least people can aspire to be in, and it's modern day. It's a shining version of Tokyo in which people from all races, nationalities, and creeds can come together, work on something together, and not feel like they have to walk on eggshells around people. And the fact that they set this vibe up within the first hour made me go, okay, you're gonna talk about some stuff. I'm here for it. Let's see where this goes. And it goes places, but like I really do need to dive more into the game. I know for a fact that I'm only like skimming the surface of what I know about it because I haven't personally like finished the game, but it is one of these like story writing things this year that I just fundamentally enjoyed. And it's hard for me to put it low on my list, but it's like even as I talk about it, it slowly moves further down the list because of how little I played of it. Which is sad because I know for a fact that the game really does deserve people's attention because it's telling an interesting story in an interesting way and it has something to say. We're gonna talk about another game that also is like that, but I'm gonna kind of save that for a little bit further in. And people that know me know that, like, when I discovered that particular game, I literally could not stop talking about it, which is why I brought the whole thing up earlier. The more a game occupies my brain, the more I want to talk about it, the more that I will like bring it up and all that kind of stuff. But when it comes to like on a technical level, like what is a really good game, I would say UFO 50 is pretty good. If you don't know, UFO 50 is a collection of 50 short, like NES, Super NES games that are. I think each individual game is made by its small independent team that was all then compiled together. Uh, and it's all surrounding this massive anthology of games that never actually existed, and each game in its own right deserves deserves like 20 30 hours of your time. UFO 50 is amazing. The reason why it's going to be lower on my list is because I just didn't play enough of it. Another game that is like that, where I think that it's going to end up being on a lot of people's lists, but for one reason or another, it's just low on my list because of how much I played, is Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. Having the gameplay of that come back in a way that it is amazing to me. I love it. I just haven't put enough time into it. And it's very easy to understand. It's very it doesn't try to hold anything back when it comes to what exactly it wants to show. That's a weird way to say it. But when it comes to Sparking Zero, it is a good, solid game that I personally would have put a lot of hours into if I wasn't, putting hours into other things. Speaking of hours into other things, uh, there was also Unicorn Overlord, a game that I sadly only really absorbed a lot of it secondhand because I played the demo of it. I think it was the yeah, I think it was just the demo. And then I like looked into like a bunch of other stuff with it. But Unicorn Overlord is made by Vanillaware. And Vanillaware games are always very pretty, very in depth, and a lot longer than you think it is. And I had to at one point just kind of sit it down and go, okay, just show me everything. And I got excited because it's fun. Uh, another game, but yeah, it's so it's another game that I kind of had that happen to me is is Grand Blue Fantasy Relink. I Grand Blue Fantasy Relink is fun. I love it. I love the characters that have come into it. I just needed to put more hours into it, and I love what they're doing. It's just not uh it's one of those RPGs that I really enjoyed playing, but as time is going to go on, it's going to slowly fade from like public consciousness and it's just not going to be as interesting. Again, like a lot of these RPG like games that I've already talked about, the more that I think about it and the more I want to go back onto it and the more I want to put my hands back onto it, like the more fun it is to me. Which is why it's really sad with how far down on the list this is. I have Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. I have not missed a the release of a Zelda game since like getting Zelda within like the launch window of the games. I haven't missed one since Skyward Sword. That's a long time to be this sort of like it's weird. I don't want to call myself a Zelda fan because I don't really see myself as that. I've just been an appreciator of the games in the series for so long that it's part of my experience with the games was getting it new, not being spoiled onto it, going into it and then playing it. Zelda Echoes of Wisdom is the first game that I missed the launch window of. And it's not because of the game not being interesting, it's because I've have all of these other experiences that I want to get into. And the same thing I kind of had with Tekken 8. Like, Tekken 8, I'm really putting on here because I put roughly around like 30 hours into playing Tekken 8, and I watched someone else go through the story mode. It's it's a fine story. I like the place that it ends at. I just I can't get back into Tekken as much as I have to that I have, and it is kind of sad. But the one game that oddly stuck with me and is going to be this like line, almost like a line in the sand for games, is going to be the Silent Hill 2 remake. They did a few things. So Bloober Team, the 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 devs of like Layers of Fear and The Medium, not usually the best people when it comes to story writing. And I feel that when they said that the era in which they made like bad games is over, I want to believe them. I just don't think that the Silent 2 Hill 2 remake is as good as it needed to be. Like the combat is still like really weird. They didn't need to do what they did in the combat. They changed around a lot of the puzzle logic to make it more modernized, but in doing so they made it less Lynchian. Like there is something dreamlike to opening a can of light bulbs or getting a key out of a jukebox. Like there was something like so surreal about the experience of playing Silent Hill as a series that when you take that away, it kind of ruins it. And I feel like the Silent Hill 2 remake is a good line in the sand that I have, where I basically tell myself things that were between the Silent Hill 2 remake and another game that I'm going to talk about next, probably, is pretty good. I would recommend it at the line of Silent Hill 2 remake. is a line where I basically go, you know, pretty good experience overall. I have some problems with it, but the thing that makes me the most annoyed is that there's something lost. And I feel bad that I did not put more time into it. Like everything below Silent Hill 2 Remake is things that I wish I put more time into, and everything above it I put sufficient time into that I would like to put more time into. And the Silent Hill 2 Remake lives in this gray zone where neither is true, and I feel like I got the exact experience that I needed to out of it, and it was just mildly underwhelming. A game, though, that I think really did deserve my time and energy was a little indie game called Web Fishing. I have taken this game off and put it back on my Game of the Year list like several times. And you'll notice that this isn't going to be like a top 10. Uh, I'll show how I've divided it up later. But Web Fishing is this cute little indie game where you dress up a dog or cat character. I'm still hoping that they add more playable races. And you just sit down. You you open up a soda that like gives you like a little bit extra like fishing experience, and you just sit there. And it just plays in the background while you're like watching a video or doing something else. And like even like a friend could come over with like a lobby code and you two could sit down and fish together. This small, quiet experience is just leagues above some of the other stuff I played. And I should kind of get into that because all of the games that I've so far talked about on this list, besides UFO 50, are all big budget games, big budget AAA games. UFO 50 comes up out of nowhere, and it rocks my rocks my world for a little bit, and it's an indie game. Most of the games that really impacted me this year were all indie games. And I feel like that in a year that was so jam-packed full of RPGs, to the fact that I wanted to get into some RPG series just so I can add them to my list, but I just did not have time or energy to do so. Like, goes to show you that there was just way too many, and I am totally there for it. I love small game experiences that are fun, unique, and interesting. And web fishing is this small little thing that I could totally see them adding more content to later. Like, hey, here's a different island. It has different things to fish onto it. Uh, Here are like more specific things that you could do here, and they don't have to do much. All they could do is we've made the social interaction part a little bit better. Uh, we hope you enjoyed your stay. And the small little casual experience is all the difference in the world that it needed to like to pull me in. And I would say that it has sufficiently pulled. I love it a lot. I feel it was worth the like $3 I spent on the game. And I'm not going to be shy about it. It is a game that I enjoyed playing more than most AAA games this year. And it's why I was having such a hard time putting it on the list, is because I felt that that was a little rude to a lot of the bigger games. But at the end of the day, I have to acknowledge the fact that they just did not capture my my heart as much as some other games, especially games like web fishing, which I could continue gushing about it for hours about how this tiny little game got me interested uh in what it was offering. Uh since we're on indie games, let's talk about another one. Let me Oh, of course. It'd just be right above it. So, uh no, it's actually like pretty high up. So, another indie game that felt like that is Balatro. So, at first, I didn't really know what to think. I saw people were playing it, and I'm like, that's fascinating. A roguelike game that's about poker hands. Okay, that's okay. And I kind of walked away. I didn't even want to touch the game for a long time, and I was just not really like paying attention. I then look over, and it's being nominated for Game of the Year. A little tiny bit of music that feels like was made in an afternoon for the game is being played by a massive orchestra and being given as much reverence as like the other games that were contenders for Game of the Year. And I sat there and went, okay, there must be something here. And the second that I saw it, I was like, okay, you've hooked me, and it went from I have not seen gameplay to I am now downloading this game onto my phone to play when I'm on the go. And it has become like a very quickly becoming a massive game I'm putting time into. Like uh I guess the best way to describe it is you have a bunch of cards. You have a hand of cards. You're told make as many poker hands as you want, and then you get enough points to go on. And you are then given modifiers to make those hands more dynamic to get you more points. And at that point you're like, okay, that kind of makes sense. But there's something that just clicks in every right way that makes your brain give out the happy chemicals that it usually does uh, when playing stuff that has gambling aspects to it. I could totally see the reason why, like in Europe, they rated the game as containing actual gambling. It's like, no, 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 it doesn't contain actual gambling, it just uses card suits. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to be that type of person. But it's giving the same type of like dopamine hits as when you are opening a loot box and you notice that there's a difference in the splash of color that comes out. That tiny little hit, and you go, oh, this is fun. I am now having fun. Balatro does that every 20 minutes. And considering that it sounds like this game isn't even the dev like working at like I don't want to be disparaging to the dev, but it sounded like the way that he was describing himself is that this wasn't even 100% effort from him. This was just him making something to make something that just went above and beyond his ability to control it. And so now everyone knows who he is. And whatever project he's working on in the future, people will be very interested to see what he's doing. I I whatever he ends up doing that is that 100% of his effort into it, like that's going to be a fascinating experience. If he can make something that is this like fun and enthralling and he could go further uh and higher above and beyond than what this game was, then I'm all on board. I want to see where this dev goes. And this is like a single dev. Much like I believe web fishing is also a single dev where it's this it's this small experience that a single dev made on a low budget, and what do you know? It's better than 80% of the games that came out this year. It is fascinating. Kind of like looking into all of this and just going, "No, this makes a lot of sense actually." Hmm. Do I want to talk about it now? I think I will actually talk about it now. Uh, which one was it? I'm just looking down the list. Yeah, speaking of big budget, you have Shadow Generations. So Sonic X Shadow Generations is a re-release of Sonic Generations with a tacked on game called Shadow Generations. Shadow Generations is what if we took the gameplay from Shadow the Hedgehog and made it really cool. And as someone who has, I will stress this enough, do not do this. As someone who has 100%ed Shadow the Hedgehog, it made me really happy to see that type of gameplay come back. Because that type of gameplay kind of went the way of the dodo after, yeah, it kind of disappeared from the Sonic franchise after the adventure games stopped being as prevalent. And I want to say that that's mostly due to factors that are outside the actual game's control, but eh, I would also say that it's other factors as well. And this is the reason why I put Shadow Generations again, not all of Sonic X Shadow Generations, because half of this game's length is playing a 7 out of 10, and that is Sonic Generations. And I do not want to give the Sonic Generations part any sort of credit. It's just the Shadow part is this high on the list. And it mostly comes down to the experience of playing something like Shadow the Hedgehog again after all these years. And guess what? Apparently it did have a lot of budget behind it, but it was a smaller team made in a realistic window on relatively lower budget than most AAA games, and it was a fun experience. And if this makes Sega wake up like what is currently going on with the Pokemon Company right now, and they go, oh, we don't need to sink a bunch of time, money, and effort into making something that's worse? Hmm. Well, how about we give it more time? We give things more time to bake and just let the budget sit so we're not like trying to go overboard. Because all they have to do is like not break the bank on every single game, and it's fine. It's the reason why the Spider-Man 2 video game, just wasn't that interesting to me. And then to hear, oh yeah, its budget was like twice the first game. And the answer to why is because they put a lot of time and effort into making the city feel more alive, but no one cared. It's tiny stuff like that that make me really not understand the AAA gaming space. Where I'm like, cool, that's really cool, but I would rather have this small indie game than whatever you just did here. And to kind of like expand upon that, here, let me just put Nightmare Cart on this list as well. Like right there. Yeah, putting Nightmare Cart right there. Made by um Bosta, the well known for the meme of I want worse looking games made by dev teams that like working on the game, uh made with less budget but looks cooler. Like, because you could do a lot with smaller dev teams and smaller expectancies. Because once you start making a game try to look too pretty, I think you are missing the point. Like, having a game look good is one thing, having a game look photorealistic is not important. Like, again, Balatro, so high on the list, is just like silly looking cards. And I would say in some regards it has a better art style than Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, a game which takes these classic characters and makes them look unrealistically beautiful. Like the the certain vistas in the game were jaw-dropping. They were amazing, and I can't wait to see how like a super high-end PC gets Rebirth looking, because that's going to be kind of neat to see. As someone who doesn't own one of those high-end computers, I'm gonna have to see it through like YouTube compression, but hey, whatever. I still want to see like how much of an upgrade it is from something like being played on a PS5. And Nightmare Cart being this tiny little game experience based off of the game Bloodborne, where you just drive around in PlayStation 1 looking carts with PS1 looking character models that are directly inspired off of Bloodborne, with both gameplay and aesthetic. It's fun. It's an incredibly fun game. All I needed was one afternoon with the game for me to know that. It was a very satisfying gaming experience, and I'm so glad that they finally got that out into the open. and hopefully people start looking into like hiring them for more things. Because honestly, I think what might happen is that big companies try to poach them for like big budget games and then putting them on like a managerial role to like make sure that things run smoothly. And I think that might be the worst outcome that could happen because I because if they're just like a manager making sure that things run smoothly, I don't think that they're gonna get what they bargained for. Like, to be completely honest with you. Hmm. Yeah, yeah, let's talk about it. Speaking of PS1 graphics, I have. Oh my gosh, I'm so bad at spelling this. Crow Country. So Crow Country is a PS1 Silent Hill of slash Resident Evil type game that if it came out on the PlayStation 1, it would be a mainstay like of popular culture. Like that is how good of an experience Crow Country is. Again, indie dev team making an experience that I wish modern AAA games had. This is another game that I'm gonna kind of need to like spoil and explain the game a bit for me to explain why I like it so much. So you play a character who goes you play a small woman going to a abandoned theme park. Like you see other adults in the game and you instantly go, "Oh, she's a lot shorter than other adults. Oh, she's probably a child." She's driving this car, she's using this gun, not usually things that you would see a kid her age, but you instantly understand, oh, she's trying to act more mature for a reason, and she is out for blood. Where is this going? And it goes exactly where it needs to, and it has fun with it. Now, Crow Country, being a horror game where a bunch of creepy monsters are infesting an amusement park, has three different levels of horror. You have the uh what is the actual term for it in English? It's uh campy horror that you see at like uh low budget like Halloween carnivals, where it's like, ooh, spooky witch, like stock footage, like scary noise, and you're like, that's funny. But then right next to it, you see a shambling, like, a massive meat, like, reform itself after being blown up, and you're just like, oh, okay. So you have this, like, uh, more, like, usual horror vibes. But then you get to the end of the game, which I'm not going to spoil, but filled my heart with so much dread and anger for the main villain that I'm just like, okay, so that's where we're going with this. And again, not to like fully spoil the game, but for it to do these two styles of horror, and then it leans in and it goes, but we could also be cosmic horror. And then they back up and go, no, 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 that would be silly. That'd be silly if we did that. But we'll at least give you the existential dread and just leave you with that. And I feel the last like hour of the game really is a fascinating note to leave off on because it feels like what is a good way to describe it? Uh I don't know the exact like English way of saying it, but I remember hearing someone refer to it as I remember someone referring to it as uh the game pulling up at the last second, which probably isn't the correct terminology for it, but the game looks like it's going to go one way, pulls away, and then it shows what it was actually heading for, and you go, "Oh, you should have gone farther." And their response was, "No, no, no. We'll hold off on that. We could do it though." And stuff like that makes me go, "Okay, this dev team is being put onto a list of people to look for, to keep watch of, just like the Balatro creator, where it's like, okay, this isn't even your magnum opus. Let's see what happens when it is. You know, that's going to be a fun experience. And I think the is that yeah, and all of these things combined, it's like smaller game experiences, like bigger budget stuff not carrying too much weight for me, but I still want things that have like a fun aesthetic. I want things to feel like that they can feel like games from years ago where you would have yearly or bi-yearly game entries and not wait for like 5 years for a game that costs twice as much to make that doesn't look any marginally better. Right here, right next to Rebirth, which some would say has been duking out for the entire year, is Astrobot. Astrobot being this platforming game where you control a little robot going around finding more robots. But the robots are oftentimes dressed as PlayStation characters. And it's really fun to watch characters that you recognize be like gathered up from the environment, and they're like doing dances and they're like hanging out with each other. And they're sometimes from games that you wouldn't expect, like these are all like PlayStation characters. So yeah, Kratos from God of War is here, which is neat. And it's like, oh, that's really cool. Dante and Virgil are here from Devil May Cry. You're like, yep, yep, yep. And then you look over, and Ape Escape is here, and you go, oh yeah, this is made by that dev team. Huh. I kind of wish that they'd make a game like that again. And then they reference Vib Ribbon, and you go, oh yeah, that was a fun experience. And then Ark the Lad is here. Parappa the Rapper is here. Uh, um, Loco Roco is here, and I'm just like, okay, these are really fascinating pulls, but I kind of want the game to go higher. And this is where it starts falling for me, like the whole game. And why I might actually, now that I have brought it up, I'm taking Astrobot, and this game that used to be my game of the year, I am actually putting below Shadow Generations now. And it's because of one very specific thing. It's a showcase of games and IPs that Sony has. And I can understand that they want to celebrate Sony's history because it's the 30th anniversary of the PlayStation. But they never do anything with these characters. You know, like them re-releasing the Sly Cooper games after so long, and people just glossed over it. And it's not even because they didn't want to play it, is that they're so dejected with the current gaming landscape of if you don't immediately jump onto this and you get everything involving this while it's here, we're gonna just call it a dead IP and then never touch it again for another like 10 years. And it made people really sad where it's like, oh, they're doing that with Sly Cooper now. That's cool. And this is coming from me who I've never really played a Sly Cooper game. I kind of want to, but I can understand people's reluctance to be happy seeing Sly Cooper show up in Astrobot when they're already so sad and downtrodden by just not getting anything from the series. And it's one of the things that make me really sad about the game and that I wish more effort was put into it. Like all they had to do was any character that you find in the game you can wear as an outfit. So it's like, hey, Solid Snake, and it's like, well, you could play as Solid Snake using his costume. I don't, I don't make me. Uh, this is an aspect that the Funko game got correct that somehow Astrobot didn't, and that hurts to say on so many different levels. Uh, that is just so gross sounding coming out of my mouth. But what people want in a game like Astrobot is, yeah, sure, I'm 100% the game. I don't really need to go back. But there were these time trial missions that I could race my friends at, and when one of my friends like logs into their PlayStation account, they'll see which character I was playing, which level I beat them in, and a little like splash like maybe decorated in a manner like equating to the character with that. That would have been great. But that's not really what they were focused on. What they were focused on is making an incredibly well-made platformer. And at the end of the day, they made an incredibly well-made platformer that even like when I talk about it now, I really do want to sit down with it and play more of the game. I haven't played any of the recently released stuff, but I really do want to sit down and play through the rest of it. But there is something a little bit sad about the sour taste that the game leaves in your mouth. That when you then hear, oh yeah, it got Game of the Year at the Game Awards, you go, Yeah, I can see why. It's a solid game experience. I just wish it deserved it. And again, it's not that it doesn't deserve it because it's not a good, well-made game. It doesn't deserve it because Sony is going to go back to not utilizing these IPs after this and then pretend like all of this was somehow not even remotely designed to lead into them gauging on which their IPs like should be brought back. Like for instance, like I don't think having something like Ark the Lad show up in this game was them testing the waters to see if people actually remembered Ark the Lad. I think it's someone on the dev team going, "Hey, do you remember Ark the Lad?" And they're like, "Yeah." It's like, "Hey, do you want to call up the people that own Ark the Lad to see if they'll allow us to use his likeness for this game?" It's been a while, but they might be okay with it. And it's neat to see him there. It's neat to see all of these other characters, and they have these cute little like decorations for their little stations that they have set up to display the characters. Uh, and so they go from just a static robot that's just standing there with the outfit to feeling like the character, where it's like, oh, this robot looks like Dante, and then you give Dante his weapons, and now he's juggling a clown using the guns, and it's this funny little thing that he's doing where like it feels like the character. Like Psycho Mantis is just standing there, but then you give him a TV and he's like switching it to the channel 3. It's like it's just kind of was it channel 2? I know that like it also does the fake turn off screen as well. But yeah, it's like all of these things really cool. I wish that it was just slightly better in like 5 different directions. So Astrobot, you were going to be my game of the year. You get knocked down a few pegs. I want you to come back and I want you to be better. And now that we have talked about all of this, every single game that has been on this list this whole time, I'm now ready to talk about my game of the year. Think about like how long Rebirth has been sitting up here. And Rebirth came out in like February. It came out like super early into the year, and it's been sitting on my top of the list this whole time. And then out of nowhere, a tiny game called Mouthwashing came out. And I was privy to a conversation that someone had after playing Mouthwashing in which he kind of sighed and just went, I've kind of seen some of this stuff before. It's not really that fascinating to me. The price is a little bit expensive for what effectively is a 3-hour movie. So I can't in good conscience like say that this was game of the year contender for me, but I at least appreciated it. And I kind of sat there, I kind of shook my head, and I knew it's because what he wanted to say is that the game did not hit him like it hit other people. There are there is a general vibe that I get from certain people that play that game in which they take a step back and they go, "Oh, okay. I know what you're trying to say. Good going, game." you're gonna make me relive this, aren't you? Because the game talks about some pretty harsh subjects. And again, I have to kind of explain the story a little bit, hopefully to not a spoilery way. But this is just how I see it. A a spacefaring freighter hits an asteroid and they are stuck in the middle of nowhere. They are running out of supplies and they are about to open up the cargo hold of their ship. So, the captain of the ship is basically a living corpse who, when the ship crashed, basically became a burned husk of a human being that now is dependent on his co-pilot, the character you play as, manually shoving down pills down his throat just so he can have a little bit of reprieve from the pain. And the good medication is running out soon. So they have to open up the cargo hold to see what's in there. The main character, Jimmy, is an unreliable narrator. And you get that from almost like square one. And you could say that it's like, well, it's not doing anything new or innovative. But what it does do is that it puts a big spotlight on the thing that it is talking about. And it goes, hey, you're kind of playing a terrible character. And some people kind of sigh and go, yeah, that happens sometimes in games. I don't really like this guy, but I'll at least play as him to kind of see where this is going. But then you are constantly reminded, you're playing a terrible person who is an unreliable narrator at every step of the way. And so there are going to be moments in this game where you sit down and you go, why is he talking like this? Why is he doing this in particular? And you realize it's because you're playing a person who is too self-conceited to even have a survival instinct. He is a person that will do anything to not be the bad guy in his own head. And I think one review of Mouthwashing put it best. This main character, Jimmy, you know a Jimmy in your life. Everyone knows a Jimmy in their life, and they are the worst person that you have ever met. The way that you know that you are not a Jimmy is that you get mad at him with us. And Jimmy is this morally irreprehensible character that does not deserve any form of sympathy or in some way he doesn't even deserve like repentance. But it's not because he's not trying. It's because he's sorry, it's not because he doesn't deserve it. It's because he's not even trying to seek it out. And in that way, it makes him one of the most loathsome villains in a story. When you have an irredeemable character who doesn't even understand that he's the villain in a lot of other people's stories. You know, the whole like adage of like you are your own hero. You would never write yourself as the villain. That is taken to the utmost degree with Jimmy, and when I really think about it, the reason why I put the game so high on the list is because it's true. I do know a Jimmy. And I wish I didn't. I totally understand why people would bounce off the story basically going, yeah, it's okay. It's not going to be as good as like the other things I was playing this year because that deserves it. I'm like, no, no, no. Like this is a little bit different. When I say when I made like a whole thing about like games that take up brain space, I have played through mouthwashing. I have watched, I think, upwards of 12 other people play through mouthwashing. I had to see a bunch of other people's perspectives. And the reason why it's so high for a lot of people, so high on people's lists, is because everyone is collectively sitting down going, I think it's time we finally talk about this as a society. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's because you haven't played the game. You haven't sat down with the game, heard it out, and understand where it's coming from. Like, I'm even getting a little bit emotional, and that's how you could tell that that this is important to me. Where I sit down and I go, what is definitively my game of the year? It is the game in which I cried to this year. And not many games really elicit that reaction from me. I'm probably going to make a quote unquote follow up video to this of like, what are my greatest games of all time? Like, my top 10 list is all going to be games that I have cried at. And I think it's important to note that any game that pulls raw emotion out of me deserves to be not only my game of the year list, it deserves to be in that like top 15 of all time. Like these games right here, these are all games that I have played this year. I could start like putting in more games that I have played this year that didn't come out this year. But at that point it would be kind of cheating. We're talking about like what is my list of games that came out in 2024? And at the end of the day, this is a fine list. Like the top like 4, 5, you completely get. And I personally never thought Astrobot would be that dethroned by something like Balatro. I never thought Rebirth would be supplanted by a 3-hour walking simulator. I never thought that Zelda would be an experience that I pass off on. And just going, I'm going to play this more later when I have more time and I have like more I have more of a desire to play something like this. It just feels insane to me that this year is filled with amazing things. And without getting too personal, like, this year has been full of great things, but has been kind of rough on me and a few other people I know. And I'm not really looking forward to what is coming in the future. I am able to sit here, though, and say that 2024 is one of the most fascinating years in video games, at least. Like, I will at least give it that it successfully supplanted itself as a very fascinating year in video games. And I'm not gonna lie, I wish I played more games. Like, there were several other games that came out this year that I'm like, man, I wish I had money and time to play that, but I just don't. Like, I still haven't finished. I never got the DLC for Elden Ring because I still haven't finished Elden Ring. Um, I never. I never played some of the other games that came out this year. Like, I wanted to give the new East game a try because I haven't played an East game before, and I wanted to like experience it for once. Like, Romancing Saga is also out. Uh, you also have like Dragon Quest III Remake. Like, there's a bunch of other RPGs that could come out. And I'm sitting there on stream and I'm like, what game do I want to play? And instead of playing any of these like new RPGs, the game that immediately comes to mind of what I want to play is I want to play something that is a lot more near and dear to me. And I think wrapping it all up with the final entry I'm putting onto here probably like probably does kind of explain some things. You know, the My Sims Cozy Bundle. So if you don't know, My Sims was a game series that released on the GameCube that is, you know, The Sims, but it has more Animal Crossing nature to it, where it's not just about like a life simulator with some city building elements. There's also this like fun and as per the name of it, very cozy experience inside the game that is just fun to play, and I love it. And it's sitting right in the middle of the list between a bunch of high budget games that I'm never going to be able to finish and amazing indie experiences that are going to stick with me for a while. And I could totally like understand why people would would be confused as to why I would put basically a port of a game on this list. And I think it's also important to note that I could have played any other game and invested any of my time into another game. I would rather boot up My Sims Kingdom than play Silent Hill 2 Remake. Like, that is my barometer, you know? It's like, hey, do you want to play the new Call of Duty? A game that's not even on this list, that I didn't even play, didn't even want to touch. Not even on this list. I would rather play a small game like Crow Country. And I would like I didn't even like look into to see if the new Call of Duty game is even good. I just skipped it. And it's not because I don't trust that the game would be good. It's because I honestly don't care if it ends up being good. And I think that that's a vibe that I kind of want to take into 2025. I want I want to do things that make me feel better and enrich my experience with games. I don't want to just play a game because it is a cool new game that's coming out. I want to play games that speak to me personally. It's like because I remember on one of my channels, I was sitting there and I'm like, well, I really want to play this game because it just came out. I want to showcase it. I want to play it, played around for a little bit, and it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel right playing one of these newer game experiences that I wasn't really getting too much out of. Even though I was having fun with it, I would just rather have booted up something small and fun to play instead. And I'm glad that several people have come to my MySims streams like agree that the game is fun and is really neat. I love it. And I oh, should I list it? Sure, why not? Probably right next to web fishing. Eh, under it. Um, so there's also a game called Random Access Mayhem that is a roguelike game where you play as no one. The game is a main characterless experience in which you play a little robot that will attack other robots and try to survive in a roguelike game. And the second that you're about to lose health, instead of dying, you jump into another robot. And this is a robot that you were fighting, that you were running around and like doing damage to. So when you jump into them, sometimes they have damage that you caused. And you're like, oh, okay. Now I have to get through the rest of this portion, like, having damage on me. And just from, like, the tiny amounts of the game that I've played, it's very fun. I'm just incredibly bad at the game. But yeah, I thought I would at least put it on the list. Very cool. I believe you should check out everything north of the Silent Hill 2 remake. Honestly, everything that I've put onto this list, I would say check this game out and come to your decision as come to whatever decision you feel like. But I feel like that if you had a similar experience to me this year, you would know that when it comes to the AAA gaming landscape, it's kind of falling apart. So the fact that most of these games are smaller game studios, more more interesting experiences, and I'm not sorry. It Gaming feels better like this. And at least when it comes to gaming, I'm looking forward to what comes next. Anyway, this has been AG. Didn't introduce myself at the beginning. That doesn't matter. Anyway, I'll see all y'all next time. Goodbye.